The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. John said to Jesus, "Master, we saw a man who is not one of us casting out devils in your name. And because he was not one of us, we tried to stop him." But Jesus said, "You must not stop him. No one who works a miracle in my name is likely to speak evil of me. Anyone who is not against us is for us. If anyone gives you a cup of water to drink just because you belong to Christ, then I tell you solemnly, he will most certainly not lose his reward. But anyone who is an obstacle to bring down one of these little ones who have faith would be better thrown into the sea with a great millstone round his neck. And if your hand should cause you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter into life crippled than to have two hands and go to hell, into the fire that cannot be put out. And if your foot should cause you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter into life lame than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. And if your eye should cause you to sin, tear it out. It is better for you to enter into the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where their worm does not die, nor their fire go out." The Gospel of the Lord. So the readings this morning touch upon an essential question, one that comes up over and over and over again. Who's in and who's out? In the first reading, we hear this moment when Moses is sharing his authority with these 72 elders. And he invites them all into the tent of meeting, and there the presence of God comes upon them. And these 70 start to prophesy. Only there's a problem. There are 2 of them missing. We don't quite know why, but Eldad and Medad, they didn't quite make it inside. They were busy with something else. But they too start to prophesy. And Joshua comes to Moses and says, "Well, Eldad and Medad, they didn't make it into the tent, and now they're prophesying, so we're trying to stop them." And Moses has this wonderful response. If only everyone was a prophet. If only the presence of God came upon everyone in this way. Why are you being so protective? Why are you jealous on my behalf? What's going on in your heart that makes you want these 2 to be out rather than in? We see the same kind of dynamic operating when John comes to Jesus and says, "There's this guy, he's casting out devils and he's using your name. Lord, it's a trademark infraction. So we've tried to stop him." And again, we can kind of hear these words of Moses coming out of Jesus. Why on earth would you stop him? If he's casting out devils, let him do it. What makes you want to draw the line and make sure that he's on the outside rather than on the in? And this is a common theme for Jesus. He talks about tax collectors and prostitutes and public sinners. He talks about Gentiles and Roman soldiers, and even including the likes of Pharisees such as Simon and Nicodemus. We're touching here upon an essential problem, one that crops up over and over and over again in the human heart, and you find it from knitting groups all the way to nations. What does it mean to be us? Our identity. Because whenever we form a group, it creates a boundary, a border. This is who we are. This is what our purpose is. This is the direction that we're walking in. You might imagine someone who turns up to a footy club with a hockey stick might get a few questions. What are you doing here? Are you here to play football? No, a club gives a boundary and an identity. And if we let anyone in who wants to play whatever they want, pretty soon our club will be full of bats, rackets, sticks, clubs, gloves, mitts and pads. And what do we lose? Footy. Footy is what brings us together. Our desire to play the same game at the same time. Groups have boundaries. Otherwise, they lose their identity. And who we are matters. Identity matters. Truth matters. These are the things that hold us together. But this also has a shadow side, because soon we can become possessive of our group. We can start to police the borders, determining who's in and who's out. And we can see this dynamic coming up in the disciples. We found one who's driving out devils in your name, Lord, so we tried to stop him. We caught this guy playing footy, but he's not in our club. And at this point, Jesus says, hang on a second. What's the problem here? Have we become closed, comfortable, cliquey? Perhaps it's that the disciples don't want to share their power or their prestige. Keep them coming to us and let them know that we're the ones who drive out devils. This is the critique that Jesus has for the scribes and the Pharisees over and over again, the ones who keep drawing and redrawing boundaries in order to point out who's in and who's out. Sorry, Eldad, sorry, Medad, you weren't in the tent. And this is where truth and identity come to be wielded as a weapon. So what does Jesus do? Jesus points to love. He looks toward the person and not just towards their characteristics. You see, the disciples here, they just see a stranger. The Pharisees, they just see a sinner. The scribes, they just see an outsider. Nothing more, nothing less. And they've fallen into this trap of allowing the group to become their possession. The ones who determine who's in and who's out. Instead, Jesus is the one who looks towards the heart and sees the person. He sees that each one is more than just the sum total of their characteristics. More than just the sum total of their history. More than just the sum total of their sins. So what's the solution? Do we just say, well, let's get rid of all boundaries and all borders and everyone's included? Well, that's not what Jesus says either. Notice this. There is one in the gospel who Jesus always excludes. Never lets him in. Not even for a second. Did you spot who it was? It's the devil. We saw a man doing what we do, which is what? Casting out devils. There's the boundary. There's the border. The devil's never to be included, never to be negotiated with. And that's the first condition of belonging to Jesus. When each of us was baptized, what was the first promise we made? Do you reject Satan? I do. And all his works? I do. And all his empty promises? I do. There's the boundary. You want to be close to Jesus? He'll cast out the devil. Because this is a devil-free zone. And he means it. If your hand should cause you to sin, cut it off. If your foot should cause you to sin, cut it off. If your eye should cause you to sin, tear it out. There must be nothing that clings to us of the darkness. We've been made free. And so the Lord will always seek to draw others in. But through the proclamation of the truth and by the expression of his power, he will free us from evil. You can't bring it with you. I think what we see here is a kind of right tension that exists between truth and love. They both go together. And don't quote me on this, this is my suspicion, but I think that whatever our personality, whatever our temperament, we're probably going to be inclined a little bit more to one than the other. That if we're ones who are inclined toward truth, then life's going to be pretty black and white for us, and we're going to be very content drawing lines and saying, right, here's the boundary. And very keen to make sure that the boundary is demarcated. And I think if that's our character and our personality, then Jesus has a word for us. We need to be challenged by love. Not to look at people as the sum total of their characteristics, and not to love rules more than people. Not to find a kind of perverse delight in drawing the boundary and finding people on the outside. For those of us who are inclined toward truth, we need to be challenged by love. But there's a flip side. For many of us, we'd rather just put down the boundaries. Let's all just get along. Let's all just come together and put aside our differences and ignore whatever separates us. And these are the moments when Jesus would say, no, hang on a second. We can't abandon the truth. Our job is to cast out the devil. We can't let people bring him in. We can't let them stay under his dominion and his control. No, we need to proclaim the truth, that they're called to be free. And for those of us who are perhaps more inclined toward love and toward inclusion, the challenge for us is going to be proclaiming the truth and having the courage to say, no, hang on a second, there's something important here that we can't ignore. That truth and love hang together in a mutual relationship. So who gets the tension right? No prizes for guessing who, it's Jesus. And he finds the right measure by mercy. Mercy is that virtue by which Jesus is able to look toward the other and see their true selves. I know you, I see you, and I love you. But mercy also is unwilling to paper over the truth and says, and I believe you can be more. My brothers and sisters, I think there's something in the gospel for each of us. Whether we are the truth tellers who like to draw boundaries, or the inclusive lovers who just want to pretend everything away, we each have a challenge. Because to tell someone the truth is truly loving. And to love someone is to tell them the truth.